Carla, we're talking about obviously the fire that just happened and the devastation of that. You unfortunately know that experience all too well because last June you dealt with the same situation. Tell me a little bit about that story from your perspective. When you first heard about it, your experience, take me through that a little bit.
We were actually out of town when the fire started on June 23rd last summer. We were on a camping and boating trip. We had a friend of my son's with us, and his mom texted me a picture Saturday afternoon and said, "This is going on, doesn't look close, but some of us are being evacuated." And so I ended up packing up the boat, my daughter and her boyfriend, and my husband, who just had surgery and non-weight bearing. He came back on Sunday with the camper. But we drove back. Now, while we were doing that, some friends of mine here called and said, "We know you're out of town. We think you might be evacuated. Do you want us to go to your house and get some things?" And I said, "Yes, please do." And they were able to come over. They got photo albums, passports. I'm a cellist. They got my two cellos, and drove our cars out, the cars that we had here. So that was a huge help. Now, by the time I got home at 11:30 Saturday night, we were not on mandatory evacuation. People south of here were, but we were not. And so then it was the waiting game for a couple days. We just did not think that the fire would come over. We knew it was several miles west of us in the foothills still. And so that Tuesday afternoon, I was home alone. We had been on pre-evacuation for a couple of hours. They were doing daily briefings, much like they're doing now. And at 4 o'clock that afternoon, they were starting the conference, and you could see people looking over their shoulder. So it was clear something was going on. And I can't remember if it was Steve Bach or if it was somebody else kind of interrupted about 4:15 and said, "We're on mandatory evacuation." And so at that point, I called my son, who was at work, and said, "You need to come home and help me," because I was the only one home. Was carrying some boxes I had pre-packed. I'd pre-packed some financial information because I thought if anything happened, that would be difficult to replicate. So I was moving those boxes into the garage, but didn't understand how bad things were. And probably about 20 minutes, so that would be about 20 till 5, opened up the garage door, looked out, and flames are coming directly down the hill west of our house. So at that point, panic sinks in a little bit. My son arrived home not too long after that. We threw boxes in the car and loaded up and got out of here.
And what was the situation like as you were waiting to find out what was going on here while you were not here at home?
So Tuesday night, we evacuated and stayed with some friends, and we watched the coverage. From what we saw, honestly, it looked like the entire neighborhood would be gone. They didn't have cameras on top of the fire, quite like we've seen with the Black Forest fire. But you could see it east looking west, and you could tell that there was a lot of involvement with houses over here. Wednesday morning, my husband and I went to his office, and he had a patient that called and said her husband's a cop and he was patrolling the area. Would we want him to drive by? So I had given her some markers. We're at the bottom of this street. Here's the cross streets. And a couple of hours later, the wife called back and said, "It's hard to tell because we don't have numbers on houses right now, the ones that burned down, but we don't think your house made it." We had another neighbor that hiked in the valley behind us, east of where we are, and got up on the ridge, and he could tell. He called us that night and said, "Our house is okay. Here's the houses that are gone. Here's the houses that didn't make it." And then probably Thursday, so it would be June 28th, I found an aerial photograph that the Denver Post had taken. And you hear that your house is gone, but I think not until I saw that photograph did it really sink in that our house is gone. That night is when they had the community meeting, and of course our house showed up on the list of destroyed homes, but a lot of people that night didn't know until they got the list. So I'm glad we had a little bit of preparation going into that community meeting, because it's very, very tough.
Take me to that moment when you knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that your house was gone.
I was in our hotel room alone, and I just sobbed hysterically. My son walked in, and I think he was a little worried about his mom at that point, because it just hits you on such a visceral level. I can't even explain it. It's just uncontrolled sobbing.
Is it just the sense that everything has been turned upside down? What kind of goes through your mind?
That's it, the unknown. At that point, I don't know that I was thinking so much about things that we lost, but just not knowing, you're like the rug's been pulled out from underneath you. You don't have solid ground. You're not sure what's going to happen. You don't understand what the insurance process will be. And so I think a lot of it was just not knowing what our path was going to be.
What was it like when you came to the property for the first time?
So that was July 1st. That was Sunday. The fire happened on Tuesday. At that point, we were pretty prepared. I did pretty well. Our family came in. They were very organized in the way they did it. I think what's going to be difficult for the Black Forest families is it's so spread out. The houses are so spread out on the acreages. Here, they could very tightly control the way they let us in. You know, they had checkpoints. We showed our identification, and they were very careful about making sure that only residents came in. So initially, you know, it was just our family, but then people and friends would drop by, specifically those that had not lost homes, and that was really good to see them. We ended up sifting through some of the remains. Some of our friends brought rakes and shovels over, and we were hoping to find stuff, and unfortunately did not find very much.
When you saw the site, how did you guys deal with that? To me, I think that would just be the most overwhelming thing in the world.
I think what was hard to get our heads around is just that there was nothing there. You know, we have concrete, we had some steel beams, the support trusses that were twisted, and it just destroyed everything. And it really did look like a war zone, like a bomb had gone off. You had piles of melted metal. We had a basketball hoop out front that was, you know, half melted over. The net had melted onto the driveway. And so I think we weren't quite prepared. You think, oh, there's a fire, you're going to see some things sticking up, and it just wasn't.
Wow. So then became the process of trying to get back on your feet. How long after you kind of digested the experience did you begin the process of starting to figure out the next steps, the next phase, how to begin to move forward?
With, you know, the day after the fire, we'd talked to our insurance agent, and it was not clear at that point that our home was lost, but they went ahead and started a claim file for us. So that was good because that put us a little bit ahead of the game. We met with an insurance adjuster within probably 2 days to just get initial things started with that insurance process. That's something that people just really, if they've gone through a loss, they need to understand how important it is that they're in contact with their insurance companies. The next thing that was really on our radar was a place to stay. Our son was going to be going into his senior year of high school, and we really wanted to stay in the neighborhood so that he would be close to school and close to his friends. And the problem is that we had, in the Waldo fire, we had, I think, 347 homes lost. And so you had that many families, and those of us with kids all wanted rental homes and temporary living arrangements in this area. And we were very, very lucky. We kind of lucked into a place within a mile of here through some friends of some friends, and that worked out really well for us. But I have friends that are clear across town. They're south part of Colorado Springs, so it has not been convenient for them to get kids back up to school, and so we were pretty lucky with that process. But you know, initially we were really consumed with trying to start that insurance process and getting housing figured out.
Now another fire. Folks in Black Forest now facing the same challenges you face. First of all, what were your thoughts when you heard about this and knew, unfortunately, a year later, the area is going through the same thing again?
You know, it brought back so many bad memories. It's been really a hard couple of days, and I think mostly because I know what they're facing, and I know they're probably in a daze like I was a year ago. And it's just such a sad time and upsetting, and I feel so bad for them because I just know how much work is ahead.
And you are part of a group that's trying to get started, that's hoping to really give these people a real, honest understanding of the situation that they're facing, and also give them some hope. Tell me a little bit about what your desire is, why you even wanted to do this to begin with.
Right away after the fire, I had an email from a friend who was pretty sure he'd lost his home, and he wanted to know if he could talk to me. And it's like, yes. Shortly after that, a friend, we actually stayed in her basement for a week while we were trying to get housing arranged. Her neighbor was hosting a family from Black Forest who lost their home, and so she wrote and said, can you talk to them and give them some advice? So I had arranged, I'm having some people over tonight that have lost homes to just show them what we did, kind of how we organize things, and just let them know that there's, it seems really bad today, but it's going to get better. It's going to take a while before it seems like it gets better. So I was in the process of doing that on my own, and I got a call from Bob Cutter from Colorado Springs Together, and they have all sorts of volunteers. It's been a fabulous organization that's helped us so much. And he said, we've been brainstorming on things we need to do. We're thinking about pairing Waldo families with Black Forest families to be mentors. What do you think? And I said, fabulous. I'm doing that on a very little scale with these people that I know, but what Colorado Springs Together has is the capacity to really organize that on a very large scale. And so, in fact, just because I know all this stuff is coming up, I went to the Colorado Springs Together website. They already have a form online that if you're interested, if you're a Waldo family that wants to help mentor a family starting this process, and vice versa, if you're a Black Forest family that wants to get some help and input from somebody who's just been through this process, those tools are already in place on the website. So I think the hope is to allow us to help people who are just getting started on this process, because we learned a lot this last year. I think what was hard for us is we didn't know what to expect, and I think if we can help some of these families understand, here's what you need to be thinking about, here's ways that we navigated it, here's some things I wish we would have done, here's some things that we did really well, I think that will be a help to them. That's my hope, and I know that's what Bob is hoping through Colorado Springs Together.
What are some of the simple things that they need to be thinking about right away here after the initial shock of all of this, that they need to start thinking about and begin moving toward to get their lives back on track?
Well, for those of us, it's my understanding there are a number of people in Black Forest that did not have insurance, and that's just something that is, I don't even know where they're going to begin on that. For those that have insurance, it's incredibly important that they get that process started. They have to contact their agent, get a claim number set up, and start to understand what their coverages are and what's available to them. I didn't understand all of the coverages that we had.
Okay, for people who are trying to get back on track now, tell me what they need to be thinking about.
One of the first things they need to do is be talking to their insurance agent. That's just so critically important that they get a claim number, a file is opened up, they'll start to get information as to what their coverages are. I don't know that we fully understood that our insurance policy provided for us to have the hotel paid for and things like that. So they need to understand what their insurance coverages are. The second big thing right now is they have to start looking for a place to live. I think I mentioned earlier that in the Waldo fire, we had 347 families that lost homes, but more than that displaced. And so you have hundreds of families looking for housing. Those of us with kids, and I know in Black Forest, those of them with kids will want to try to keep their kids in familiar surroundings, familiar schools, and with their friends. And they just need to really get on that. I know they're not going to feel like doing this stuff, but they have to be really proactive in finding a good place to live. I mean, get your insurance claim started, get that housing figured out. Those are the two probably most important things to be doing this week.
Looking then past this week and starting to look long term, what are some of the advice that you would give them as they look long term, things they need to be considering, things they need to be thinking about?
Oh, where to even start? They have to figure out what they want to do, and that took us a while. We weren't sure we wanted to rebuild. It's a tremendous amount of work. Very, very happy with this very lovely home that we moved back into. But it's a lot of work. I think for the Black Forest families, clearing the land is going to be difficult. What we didn't have so much here in Waldo was just all the tree debris. I mean, we lost a fair number of trees here, but not like the forest that they have. They've got to figure out if they want to build back in that area where they've lost so much of what probably drew them in the first place. And then once they get to that decision, then they go through the process of looking at homes. Do you go with a custom builder, a spec builder? We happened to spend a lot of time last summer at the Parade of Homes, which will be probably end of July, beginning of August, to get some ideas. Do we even want to do this process? What do we like about a home? What builders are we interested in? And that will just take a fair amount of time. The thing that is just going to consume a lot of their summer, the insurance policies provide that your contents of your house, you get reimbursed for those, but to do that you have to prepare an inventory list. That was something I spent several months on pretty much nonstop because I personally wanted to have that done. I have friends who haven't turned their inventory forms in yet, but I would really encourage people, you have to start that process of identifying what you had, and then you have to do research as to what it's worth and how much it will cost to replace. And it's going to take a tremendous amount of time, but don't put it off.
Why?
Because it's hard to remember. We were really lucky in that I got my photo albums out. I went around before we left and took some very quick pictures on my phone of the house, of the garage. The garage was particularly important because normally family photos don't have a lot of garage photos, but when my husband did the garage inventory, for him to be able to look at a picture and think, oh, we had that mower, that trimmer, that refrigerator in the garage, it was so much help because there's so much to remember, and I think the longer you get past the event, the harder it will be to remember that stuff.
Now, can I ask you a tough question, okay?
Okay.
You're a wife and you're a mother. We've talked about the logistics of the practical things. What do these people need to understand about being a family person and how to help their loved ones and themselves get past this experience and move on to draw together? You understand what I'm kind of asking you?
And I think you need to take time for each other. We were drawn in 50 different directions. It was really important to my husband that we find a time as a family to really talk about that day, and for us it did not happen until August. Just because after the fire, initially my son stayed with some friends because we were in a one-room hotel room with the cat and the dog. And so we were kind of all scattered, and then we're busy with, obviously I'm very busy with inventory forms and trying to replace some things that we just had to have, clothes, just some essential things. But it's really important to talk to your kids. Now, we were lucky. Our son was getting ready to go into a senior year of high school. Our daughter was beginning her junior year in college, so our kids were older. And I think my friends that I have, the little kids, that's been more difficult because it's really an upsetting thing. I know some of my friends' children had problem with nightmares. You could hear them saying, pack this, and they're, in the middle of a dream. And so there were a lot of resources for people through Colorado Springs Together. One was Aspen Point, and that will help with some mental health counseling, and I would really encourage people, particularly if you have young kids and don't know quite how to deal with that or to help them, because they're probably not feeling safe right now, is what I gather from my friends with young kids, and it's going to take a while for them to feel a little more secure.
Okay. Looking back now on that experience, what would you say was how can I think this out through? What would you say was the most rewarding part of it? What did you learn? What things did you take away from it that were not just the tragedy? What came from the other side of it for you?
Well, absolutely. The overwhelming outpouring of support was overwhelming. We had so many people reaching out. There were, the Colorado Springs Together organization, the fact that they put that together so quickly, it was a real resource. We used it a lot as a resource. They put together seminars on everything from low voltage to insurance claims. The HBA, the Home Building Association, I think is what that stands for, they had put on seminars of here's what you have to know about debris removal. I mean, there are a lot of important things to understand about how to remove the debris from the home site because it's dangerous. And there's, chemicals and things that you have to be very careful about. So they had organized seminars for us so that we could go educate ourselves. We personally had friends that, they drop off I had friends dropping off meals. Somebody did I don't know if you'd call it a meal tree, but they signed up, and every other night I'd get a new meal from somebody, which was great because the last thing I wanted to think about is what do we cook for dinner tonight. That was a tremendous help. We had friends that dropped off gift cards. CareCair organized a number of food giveaways. We'd get boxes of food. So there are so many generous people in Colorado Springs, and from elsewhere too, but I think that this community is just really unique in how they have reached out to make things a little bit easier for us.
And finally, my last question, we've kind of talked about this and circled around it, but let's say I am someone who has just gone through this experience. Talk to me about what, from your heart, whatever you want to say, talk to me as someone who has just gone through this experience. What do you want me to know?
That it's okay to be sad, that you are going to have good days and bad days. You need to pace yourself because it's a long process. It's not going to be done for you next week or next month or 2 months or 3 months. So you need to understand how important it is to take care of yourself, let your friends help you. One of the things that I try to tell people, our family we've done a lot of giving. We've been lucky enough to do some mission trips to parts of the world that are very, very poor, and we've had some experiences that just allowed us to see, one thing, people really don't have anything. But to be able to give back to people is a really rewarding thing, and I think for us to allow people to give to us was good for us and good for other people. So let your friends help you. I know that I could not have done this without the support of my friends and family and the community.
Okay, very good. Anything else you want to add that I have missed or you thought was important?
No, because I think we talked about the Colorado Springs Together website. I think people also need to be educated about other resources out there. I know Red Cross will help people, CareCair, the El Paso County. They've set up a disaster recovery site over on Garden of the Gods, and people need to be educated about those resources and take advantage of them.
Any other resources or websites or anything that you know of that?
There was an organization that came into town shortly after the fire, and I want to say it's CARE, C-A-I-R, and I do not remember what that stands for, but it was a group of people, I think in California, that went through fires, and they have a nonprofit organization, and they go help people with the insurance process. Sadly, some people are going to have problems with their insurance companies.
Right.
And so you just need to be educated and aware. But I think if you start with like Colorado Springs Together, because they have so many resources now, they're listed on the website where you can go, and they have the links to different places to go. I think that's probably a good place to start.
Okay. Are you excited about, despite the situation, are you excited about working with Colorado Springs Together in this new project and bringing Waldo survivors with Black Forest survivors and trying to help bridge that situation?
Yes, and when Bob Cutter had called, I guess 2 days ago, well, I don't remember if it was yesterday or 2 days ago, one of the things I suggested to him is maybe it's time for me to come sit in on some of these meetings. We had so many volunteers that have been helping out there, but I think it would help them to have the perspective now of somebody who's been through it and knows firsthand what helps. But what I really do hope happens with this process is that we can just make it a little bit easier for some of these families. We're not going to make it easy. I mean, there's just nothing we can do to make it better in terms of what they're going through. But I think we can give them information, knowledge, help them maybe streamline the process and not spend so much time trying to figure things out, because we have a lot of information to give. And if they can get this organized through Colorado Springs Together, it's going to be a real gift, I think, for those families.
Okay. Finally, my last thing, you kind of touched on this, but I just kind of want to circle around it again. Colorado Springs Together as an organization, what are your thoughts and feelings about it, and how valuable was it to you?
Well, I think you had a little bit of an opportunity to go around the neighborhood today. It's remarkable to me that less than a year after our fire, you have this community that's so far along in the rebuilding process. Part of that is because Colorado Springs, whether it's through the mayor's office, the utilities, the building department, all of those organizations have been working together to try to streamline the process for us. Not that it was perfect, but I think we had so many people helping in different city organizations in conjunction with Colorado Springs Together. And so I think we're maybe unique from some other areas of the country where that partnership between the community and the city government and the county government, you haven't necessarily seen that, and the result is that we are so much further along, I think, in the building process and the rebuilding process.